Everyone thought they knew who Mateo was. Quiet, polite, hardworking. The kind of man who never caused trouble, never raised his voice, and never asked for more than what he had. For 15 years, he worked the night shift at the same bakery, in a small American town, kneading dough before dawn while the rest of the city slept. People smiled when they saw him. Some even called him the soul of the shop. But Mateo never spoke much about his past. "I came here for a better life," was all he ever said. No one asked more, and he never offered. Until one day, a routine visit from a government official changed everything. The moment his name was run through a database, alarms were triggered. The truth, long buried under layers of silence, began to rise, and what it revealed shocked everyone who thought they knew him. It wasn't just that Mateo had crossed the border illegally years ago. Many suspected that already. It was what he had left behind, what he had run from. The name he had used when he arrived wasn't his real one. His papers were forged. His story, carefully crafted to blend in, was missing a crucial chapter. And when the authorities connected the dots, they found something that made them pause. Decades earlier, in a country torn by violence and corruption, Mateo had been more than a baker. He had been a soldier, but not just any soldier. He had been part of an elite unit in a regime later accused of war crimes. His face, aged and quiet, now once stood in military photographs, stone-faced in uniform. A fugitive, a hero, a villain. No one knew how to label him, but the town was forced to reconcile the man they loved with the man they never really knew. As word spread, reactions were divided. The bakery shut its doors, not by legal order, but from fear and confusion. Customers who once greeted Mateo warmly now avoided eye contact. Some demanded justice, others defended him fiercely. "He's a good man," they said. "He raised my son's wages when no one else would." But facts had surfaced. Documents, testimonies, and a digital trail leading back to events that many thought were lost in the ashes of a distant war. Journalists circled, hungry for answers. One reporter, a young woman named Lila, decided to speak to Mateo directly. He didn't run. He didn't deny. Instead, he invited her in. They sat at his small kitchen table, the smell of cinnamon and old memories thick in the air. And with a heavy breath, Mateo began to tell his real story, not the one he had told for years, but the one he had buried to survive. He spoke of a boy, not a man. A teenager drafted at gunpoint in the highlands of Guatemala. Of friends who disappeared in the night. Of orders that didn't feel like choices. Of lines he didn't want to cross, but didn't have the power to resist. He didn't justify. He didn't glorify. He simply told it. How he escaped after a mission turned bloody. How he fled with nothing but the uniform on his back and the guilt on his chest. How he arrived in America under a false name. How he worked quietly, never seeking attention, always fearing that one day the past would catch him. And now, it had. But Mateo didn't ask for forgiveness. He didn't cry. He only asked that his story be heard fully, not in fragments. Lila, shaken but moved, promised she would write it exactly as he said. No more, no less. As Lila's article went live, the town held its breath. The headline didn't accuse, it invited. The man you thought you knew, Mateo's truth. Some people read with empathy, others with anger, but almost all agreed on one thing. Nothing was simple anymore. The local church held a community meeting to discuss the story. Families came, voices raised, emotions raw. And then, unexpectedly, Mateo showed up. Not to defend himself, but to listen. Standing quietly at the back of the hall, he waited as people voiced their fears, their betrayals, their compassion. And in that moment, a deeper question began to rise in the room. What does justice really mean when the past and present collide? And who decides if a person's worst day should define their entire life? The story was far from over. In fact, it had just begun. In the days following the community meeting, The town of Elmswood no longer felt the same. Mateo's presence, once unnoticed in its quiet familiarity, now stirred unease wherever he went. People whispered in grocery aisles, paused conversations when he passed by. He walked slower, not because he feared confrontation, but because he respected the weight of their stares. Some residents began demanding legal action, writing letters to immigration services and tagging elected officials on social media. Others, particularly the immigrant community, rallied behind him, not to excuse the past, but to defend the man they knew now. They pointed to his work, his charity, his role as an unofficial mentor for dozens of young men in the neighborhood. Whatever. He was, said one mother at a city council meeting. He became something better here. Lila continued to dig deeper. Her article had gone viral, drawing attention far beyond Elmswood. National outlets picked up the story. Commentators debated it on television. Some framed Mateo as a reformed soul, a man who had done the impossible by transforming his identity and serving his new community with honor. Others condemned him as a war criminal hiding behind a clean apron. The truth, as always, was complicated. Lila uncovered military records, old trial transcripts, and even testimony from a human rights organization that had once listed Mateo's unit in their watch list. But nowhere was his name mentioned directly. He had not been accused, only associated. The line between guilt and survival blurred more with each fact she uncovered. One night, Lila received an anonymous email. No name, just a scanned photograph of young Mateo in uniform, dated 1985. On the back, a name she hadn't seen before, Capitan Santiago Reyes. It was him. She confronted Mateo, who did not deny it. "That was my name once," he said. "They gave it to me. I left it behind when I left that life." He explained that during his military service, officers often used aliases. Reyes had been his command name, used in field reports and orders. He confessed that in one particular mission, a village was raided. He had been there. "I didn't fire a weapon," he said, "but I stood there. I watched. I did nothing. That is my shame." He stared at his hands as he spoke, as if trying to erase the memory written into his skin. With new information in hand, Lila was torn. She could publish everything, the old name, the mission, the village's fate, and ignite a media firestorm, or she could continue the story with care, refusing to flatten a man's life into a headline. She chose the latter. Her second article, "The Name He Carried," focused not on exposing Mateo, but on exploring the weight of forced identity. She included quotes from historians, interviews with ex-military from the same region, and a powerful reflection on what it means to carry guilt, not for what you did, but for what you allowed. The piece was nuanced, and though it didn't trend as widely, it struck deeper. Readers began to send letters. Survivors, former soldiers, sons and daughters of refugees, each with stories echoing Mateo's own. Meanwhile, legal pressure was mounting. Immigration officials opened a formal investigation into Mateo's status. A removal hearing was scheduled. If proven that he had used a false identity to gain entry, he could be deported. Elmswood divided further. Local activists held candlelight vigils in front of the bakery. Veterans groups protested, calling for accountability. Tensions spilled into schoolyards and city forums. Lila visited Mateo again, asking how he felt about what was unfolding. "I knew this day would come," he said. "You can't outrun your shadow forever." He had already begun to pack. He didn't want to wait for someone to drag him out. "I will face them, but I want to leave the truth behind at least." The hearing took place in a small courtroom, away from cameras. Mateo's lawyer argued that his client had lived peacefully and productively for over a decade, contributing meaningfully to society. The government presented the photo, the military ties, the false identity. Mateo did not dispute the facts, but before closing arguments, the judge asked him directly if he had anything to say. Mateo stood. His voice was low but steady. "I came here with shame. I thought I could bury it by doing good. But I've learned you can't erase the past. You can only own it. If you send me back, I understand. But know this. I was never trying to escape justice. I was trying to become someone worthy of mercy. The judge requested time to deliberate, and the town held its breath once more. In the meantime, Mateo returned to work, quietly reopening the bakery with the help of a few loyal customers. People came, slowly at first, then in larger numbers. Not all bought bread. Some just stood. In the shop, unsure of what to say, one teenage boy came in with a note folded in his hand. He didn't speak, just left it on the counter. Mateo read it after closing. It said, "You helped me when I was about to drop out. You told me I was worth more. I don't care what they say, thank you." That night, for the first time in weeks, Mateo cried. Lila's articles had now been compiled into a podcast episode by a national outlet. Her calm, compassionate tone stood out in the chaos of polarized news. In the episode, she raised questions that resonated deeply. Can someone who once stood in the wrong place ever stand in the right one again? Do we judge people by who they were or who they've become? Mateo's voice appeared at the end of the podcast, sharing a final message. If my story teaches anything, let it be this: no one is just one thing. The episode went viral. Public opinion began to shift. The national conversation changed, from punishment to reconciliation, from criminality to complexity. Days before the final ruling, Lila visited Mateo one last time. She brought with her a letter from a man who claimed to have served in the same unit. He had recognized Mateo's photo and confirmed that Mateo had indeed tried to protect civilians during the raid, an act that ultimately got him demoted. The letter wasn't legal proof of innocence, but it added context that no database could show. Lila gave Mateo the letter and asked how he felt now. "Strange," he said. "Like a door is opening, but I don't know if I deserve to walk through it." He looked out his window, where morning light was spilling over rooftops. But maybe it's not about deserving. Maybe it's about choosing to walk anyway. The day of the final decision arrived. The courtroom was filled, not with press, but with people from town, bakery customers, former students he mentored, even the mayor who had once quietly opposed him. They sat shoulder to shoulder, waiting. The judge read her decision slowly, carefully. She acknowledged that Mateo had entered the country under false pretenses and that he had concealed part of his identity. But she also cited his years of service to the community, the personal testimonies, and the absence of direct evidence linking him to any act of violence. Then, with a firm but empathetic tone, she declared that Mateo would not be deported. Instead, his case would be deferred, and he would be allowed to apply for legal residency under humanitarian grounds. The room exhaled at once. Some cried. Mateo stood motionless, stunned. Lila reached for her notebook but paused, watching the emotions spread across his face. Daniel, the boy who had written the thank you note, ran up to hug him. Others followed. For once, Mateo was not silent. He spoke, quietly but clearly. "Thank you. I don't know how to repay this, but I'll spend the rest of my life trying." That night, Elmswood wasn't divided. It was united, not by agreement, but by shared humanity. People lit candles outside the bakery again, this time not in protest, but in peace. News outlets reported the story in a new tone now. "A town's redemption," one headline read. Another said, "Justice with compassion." The debate didn't disappear, but it matured. Mateo's case became a case study in law schools, discussed in ethics, seminars and immigration workshops, but more importantly, it became a story people told at dinner tables. Not just about a man with a secret, but about what happens when we choose understanding over outrage. Mateo continued to bake, continued to serve, and now, finally, continued to live without hiding. The secret was out, and instead of destroying him, it had set him free. Months passed, and the noise surrounding Mateo's story faded. What remained was something quieter, deeper, a changed community. Elmswood had learned something many towns never do, that sometimes the most dangerous thing is the story we never ask to hear. Mateo applied for permanent residency, sponsored by the very bakery he helped build. Lila went on to write a book inspired by his story. In her dedication, she wrote, "To those who carry silence like a burden, may your truth be heard with grace." The book became a bestseller, not because it was shocking, but because it was honest. Mateo visited schools now, speaking to young people about identity, consequences, and the courage to face the truth. He didn't glamorize his past. He spoke softly, answered questions without evasion, and always ended with the same message. What matters is not where you began, but who you choose to be next. He had no illusions about redemption. He didn't expect everyone to forgive, but he no longer lived in fear. That, for him, was enough. And so, the man with the secret became the man with the voice, a voice that once trembled now taught others to speak. A presence that once avoided light now stood in it. The town of Elmswood didn't forget what had happened, but they chose not to let it define everything. Mateo's journey was never about clearing his name. It was about reclaiming it. And in doing so, he reminded a nation that the truth, even when it hurts, can still heal, if we're willing to listen. Mateo's life settled into a rhythm that, for the first time in decades, felt truly his. The fear of discovery that had shadowed his every step was gone. He woke early to open the bakery, not because he had to, but because he wanted to. The scent of bread rising in the ovens was now a symbol of freedom rather than routine. His hands, once trained to obey violent orders, now created warmth and nourishment. Each loaf was an act of quiet defiance against the man he had once been. And the people of Elmswood, though still processing, still reconciling, returned. Not all, of course. Some would never forget what they learned, but many had come to understand that identity is not static, and that Mateo's story, like all of ours, had layers. Esperanza Community Center invited him to lead a weekly class for new immigrants. He hesitated at first. What could he possibly teach? But the first session changed him. Dozens of people from different countries and backgrounds came not just to learn how to integrate, but to hear his story. He spoke to them openly, warning them not to build their lives on silence. "The truth finds you eventually," he said, "and it's better when you're the one to give it shape." The group grew. Soon, he wasn't just a baker or former soldier. He became a mentor, a kind of elder voice for people searching for a way to belong without erasing who they had been. In that room, Mateo didn't hide. He didn't shrink. He simply told the truth and allowed others to do the same. Lila remained close, documenting Mateo's evolving role in the community. Her book had brought her opportunities across the country, interviews, book signings, even a potential film deal. But she often returned to Elmswood to visit. Their bond had transcended subject and journalist. They shared a quiet respect, each grateful to the other for revealing and holding the truth with care. One afternoon, as they sat outside the bakery with coffee, Lila asked him what he feared now. Mateo looked down at his hands, weathered and strong, then replied, "Only time. I don't know how long I have left, but I want to spend every moment making up for the ones I wasted." That evening, Lila wrote in her journal, "Redemption is not the erasure of guilt, but the determination to live better, even when the past can't be undone." The town of Elmswood, too, began to change. Inspired by the discussions around Mateo's case, the City Council launched a Stories We Carry initiative, an oral history project designed to capture the untold experiences of immigrants, refugees, and marginalized residents. Schools adopted the program into their curriculum, and high school students interviewed their grandparents and neighbors, uncovering forgotten chapters of family legacies. What began as a story about one man's secret became a catalyst for collective healing. Pain, once hidden, became shared, and from that, understanding grew. But not all reactions were positive. A small but vocal group of citizens still protested Mateo's continued presence in town. They argued that no matter what he had become, he should not be allowed to stay. They circulated petitions, organized online campaigns, and tried to bring political pressure. Mateo responded not with anger, but with presence. He did not hide from them. He attended the town halls, listened respectfully, and when given a chance, spoke softly and honestly. I know some of you will never accept me. That's your right. But I live here now. I work here. I love this town, even if it doesn't love me back. Over time, their voices grew quieter, not because they were silenced, but because the community chose not to echo them. Meanwhile, immigration authorities reviewed Mateo's residency application. Because his case had drawn national attention, it faced unusual scrutiny. Advocates submitted letters on his behalf, including one from the village where the alleged raid had occurred decades earlier. A survivor, now a local leader, wrote that Mateo had, in fact, helped civilians escape that day, including her younger brother. The document shifted the tone of the case significantly. Mateo was called for one final interview at the regional immigration office. He went alone, dressed in his work clothes, no lawyer at his side this time. When asked why he thought he should stay in the country, his answer was simple. Because I've built something here worth staying for. Not for me, but for the people I now serve. Months later, Mateo received a letter in the mail. It arrived with no fanfare, no headline, no media coverage, just a plain white envelope with a federal seal. Inside was a notice: permanent residency granted. The page trembled in his hands as he read it again and again, almost disbelieving. After years of living in the shadows, of holding his breath, of preparing for exile, Mateo had been told, "You can stay." He placed the letter on the table, beside a cooling loaf of bread, and allowed himself a rare moment of joy. He wept, not because he felt victorious, but because for the first time in his life he felt safe. The news spread slowly through town. Mateo didn't announce it. He simply kept showing up, as he always had. But his smile was a little easier, his posture a bit taller. Daniel, the teenager he once mentored, stopped by the bakery and hugged him. "Told you they'd see who you are," he said. Leela sent flowers with a card that read, "You earned this every day," long before it became official. At the next session at Esperanza Center, Mateo brought the letter and read it aloud. The room erupted in applause. Some wept, others clapped. A few simply placed hands over their hearts. It wasn't just a victory for Mateo, it was a validation for them all. The letter didn't erase Mateo's past. It didn't undo what had been done, nor did it promise universal acceptance. But it gave him something he never truly had: a place, a country to call his own. Not borrowed, not hidden behind a false name, but his. He began teaching citizenship classes, helping others navigate the path he had once feared to walk. He didn't shy away from telling them the truth. This country will ask a lot of you. It may doubt you, but keep showing up. Keep telling your story. Don't let fear write your ending. His words mattered now, not just because of where he'd come from, but because of where he had chosen to go. Years passed. Mateo grew older, his steps slower, his hands stiffer, but his spirit remained sharp. The bakery became a local landmark, a symbol not just of good bread, but of resilience. Tourists sometimes came asking for the man from the story, and Mateo would greet them with a smile, offer a fresh roll, and often a quiet story if they had time to listen. He never tried to rewrite history. He never turned his journey into entertainment. But when people asked why he stayed, why he didn't flee when things turned dark, his answer remained the same. Because silence is a prison, and I had lived there long enough. Daniel, now a college graduate, returned to Elmswood and opened a youth center just blocks from the bakery. He named it La Voz, the voice, as a tribute to what Mateo taught him. At the center's opening ceremony, Daniel invited Mateo to speak. The room was full of young people, many of them immigrants or children of immigrants, each carrying their own burdens. Mateo stood slowly, eyes scanning the room, and spoke with calm resolve. We are not defined by the worst things we've done, or by the hardest things we've survived. We are defined by what we do next. So choose carefully. Choose courage. Lila's book was adapted into a film, earning awards and igniting national dialogue on truth, redemption, and the immigrant experience. Mateo never sought credit. He attended one screening, sat in the back, and quietly slipped out before the applause. Fame was never his goal. Peace was, and he had found it. Not in being praised, but in being known, in the bakery, in the classroom, in the faces of those he had helped heal. His life was not perfect, but it was real, and it was his. When Mateo passed away, the town of Elmswood held a vigil, not just for a baker or a neighbor, but for a man who showed them all how to hold truth with dignity. The town square was filled with candles, flowers, and handwritten notes. The mayor gave a eulogy. Lila read from her book. Daniel spoke last. He wasn't just part of our community. He changed it. He taught us that courage doesn't always roar. Sometimes it needs dough at dawn and tells the truth even when it hurts. There were no protests that night. Only silence, grief, and gratitude. In the months that followed, the bakery remained open, run by volunteers, then by Daniel and others who had trained under Mateo. A small plaque was placed by the door. This place was built by truth. Welcome. Tourists continued to visit, but the real visitors were locals, neighbors, and the very immigrants Mateo once guided. His legacy didn't fade. It multiplied in stories, in lessons, in lives changed quietly, completely, forever. Mateo's secret had once threatened to destroy him. Instead, it became the very thing that saved others. His story wasn't clean or easy. It was complex, layered, human. And in that, it became something greater than scandal or survival. It became truth. And the truth, when carried with courage, doesn't just expose what we've done. It reveals who we can still become. If this story moved you, take a moment to share it. There are so many voices still hidden in silence. Your support helps bring them to light. Like this video if you believe in second chances. Comment below and tell us what part of Mateo's journey stayed with you, and subscribe to the channel for more true stories that challenge, inspire, and connect us all. Every view, every share, every subscriber helps us keep telling the stories that matter.